only thing we have to fear is
in war.
fear itself.
There is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton. Our website is wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. David, we've had a few programs in the last few months over the situation in Houston with pastors there standing up against the mayor that was trying to get some ordinances passed that just created horrible situations with regard to the bathroom bill and other what they call non-discrimination ordinances for special rights for gays. But it's not just Houston. This thing's happening all across the country. What are these NDOs? What's kind of the purpose of them? And how do we, what's the reason for the church saying, hey, these are a bad idea?
They're loaded up with unintended consequences. And what happens with these, let me take you back a number of years to a thing that happened in the 1970s, the mid-1970s, when there was an attempt to put in the U.S. Constitution an Equal Rights Amendment. Said everybody should be treated equally. Well, we got that in the 14th Amendment, et cetera. But they wanted in there specifically because then they could say women's rights, women weren't being treated equal and whoever else. And so even though the Constitution had that, they wanted this. Well, it was people like Phyllis Schlafly who got with Mike Farris and others, and they beat this thing down. They literally beat it back. And the argument was that if you get this, the unintended consequences are you're going to have people claiming equality that will be things that actually the country is not agreeing with. And they said, no, it won't happen. This really simple stuff. As the federal amendment got turned down, the constitutional amendment, a lot of states said, well, we'll do it on our own. And so states started doing it on their own. And lo and behold, it is the states who had the state equal rights amendment. They were the first ones to say, I'm sorry, we have to overturn traditional marriage. We have to allow homosexual marriage because our state equal rights amendment says that we have to treat everybody the same, and that means homosexual marriage is the same as traditional marriage. Well, that was never the intent of that amendment when it was passed in the 70s. And so there's always these unintended consequences. And so what we're seeing now is that as homosexual marriage has grown, a lot of unintended consequences. You lose the right of conscience. You get fined if you don't support. We saw out of the federal government, they said, look, if you do not positively affirm homosexual marriage, we will take that you're opposed to homosexuals, that you're anti-homosexual. And so all this stuff has come out now that really puts freedom of speech into question. It puts freedom of conscience into question. It puts religious freedom into question. But this has still gained steam all across the country.
So it always sounds really fair and equitable and like justice of some kind in the way they phrase it or whatever, but then it's those unintended consequences, things that you may not even be thinking this would apply to. That's where the real danger comes in.
Well, let's take the Atlanta fire chief. I mean, the Atlanta fire chief, active member of his church, and wrote a Bible study about traditional marriage and how to strengthen your family. And because of that, the Atlanta mayor fired him, said, well, you support traditional family. You're obviously anti-homosexual. Wait, whoa, time out. You mean he doesn't have a right to go to his church and be part of a Bible study and help write a curriculum that supports man and woman in marriage? Not in Atlanta, because they have a non-discrimination ordinance. And that non-discrimination ordinance, if you support traditional marriage, that's automatically discrimination. So what's happened is well over 170 cities have now passed these non-discrimination ordinances. Now, there have been problems all along the way. When we go back, we had a program here a few years ago on what happened in El Paso, Texas. That El Paso, the city council there, they passed one of these ordinances, and the people in El Paso said, wait a minute, we like things the way they are. We don't think you should give special rights to homosexuals. And so they had domestic benefits and other things. And so they put it on the ballot, and the city of El Paso struck it down. They said, we don't like what the city council did. It got struck down. City council came in after the election and said, well, we really don't care what the people wanted. We're going to do it anyway. And so then there was an effort to have a recall election of those officials that refused to abide by the city vote. And that's where the courts got involved and said, whoa. Churches don't have a right to be involved in recall elections. Who do they think they are? Citizens? Do they think they have a right to sign petitions for recall? And so what you find is this discriminatory type stuff. In the name of non-discrimination, it really heightens discrimination. So El Paso, then San Antonio did it. We did some programs in the San Antonio one. $500 a day fine if you disagree with homosexual marriage and say so. If you say that you are for traditional marriage, you are not allowed to hold office in San Antonio. If you're in office and say that you support traditional marriage, they dismiss you from office as malfeasance of office. So it went from there, then it went to Houston. And in Houston, when the city council passed it again, the people said, we don't want this. So they got a petition together to have a referendum on it. And that's when Houston got involved and said, well, we'll show you churches. You don't have the right to have a referendum on this. And so that's when they started saying, we want to see your sermons. We want to see your emails. We want to see your Facebooks. We want to see anything that.
Well, man, you know what? When you give that list like that, I'm starting to think maybe they're not just unintended consequences. They might be unintended with some people that end up supporting it because they buy the lie, but for the ones really pushing this, these are probably the intended consequences.
This is intended consequences, but they always get, listen, all we want is equality. We're not wanting superiority. All we want is equality. And they say, okay, that's fine. We support that. See, once you get something on the books, it's extremely hard to get it off the books. And they know that. And it's always the camel's nose in the tent. You know, once Jimmy Carter had started the Department of Education, it was almost impossible for Ronald Reagan to abolish the Department of Education. Ronald Reagan is against education? How can he be against education? So you try to repeal this. You mean you're against equality? You are for discrimination? And so once it gets done, man, it becomes a bludgeon whereby you just nail other people. And so what's happened is Fayetteville passed one of these. And with Fayetteville having passed one, there the churches did stand up and on the ground, this is the first in 170 cities that actually repealed it. So Mark Gonzales, a good friend of ours, I've worked with Mark for a number of years. He was there in Fayetteville and got 60 some odd churches put together, and they ran the referendum, and it was voted down. And by the way, it's impressive because they turned out more votes on the referendum to turn it down than had been. More votes in Fayetteville, that's the third largest city in Arkansas, more votes on that than voted for the governor or voted for the U.S. senator. They had a higher voter turnout in the city election than they did for the other election. So it was massive. Mark did a remarkable job with this. This is something that needs to be copied in cities across the United States. Go to Mark for help with this.
Man, so many things you just said that are huge positives. I mean, just the turnout, the interest, the fact that people took action, the fact that they didn't just defeat an ordinance like this coming out. To overturn is even harder to do. So just a great victory. Mark Gonzales is going to be with us to tell us about it when we come back from the break. Stay with us right here on WallBuilders Live.
Hi, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders. And I want to encourage all the pastors out there with the unique opportunity that we're presenting at WallBuilders. We're doing a special tour just for pastors that you can come and learn more about the spiritual heritage of our nation. Not just seeing the sites, but understanding the significance of what they are and what they represent. We get to go through the Capitol at night, and we get to see the spiritual heritage of our founding fathers, of who we are as a nation, where we came from. We bring in congressmen that'll tell you about current legislation, about our religious liberties and freedom, and what's going on in Washington, D.C. If you're a pastor, or if you want to recommend your pastor for this trip, you can go to our website, www.wallbuilders.com, and there's a link that's for scheduling. If you click on that link, there's a section for Pastor's Briefing. There's more information about the dates, when it's going, how it's going to happen. If you want to know more about our nation, our religious liberties, our freedom, our spiritual heritage, this is a trip you want to be a part of.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. We appreciate you staying with us. Our guest today is Mark Gonzales. He is the founder of the United States Hispanic Prayer Network and the United States Hispanic Action Network. Mark, thanks for coming on, bro.
Hey, thank you, Rick. It's great to be on with you here today.
Hey, I am most impressed. You guys have done something that hasn't happened very often and gotten government to reverse itself. They're in Fayetteville, Arkansas. They had a non-discrimination. They love that word, but it really is a discrimination ordinance when you look at what it actually does. But the non-discrimination lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender ordinance that they had there. It's been on the books for quite a while, and you guys got it to a ballot, and the people said no.
Yes, it was a great victory for people of faith and the Christian community, when, especially since this is the 175 that have already passed across the country, that the Human Rights Campaign has been behind. This is the first one that has actually been repealed. It went through the whole process where, yes, it passed city council, then it had to go through a referendum to actually get on the ballot, then it got on the ballot, then the people voted, and we actually repealed it all the way. So we went through all the processes, and then finally we're able to get this victory and send a message that this can be repealed, because this was the first one across the country. So it was exciting news for all those that are having to deal with this, like a tsunami that's going across the country, especially with the Human Rights Campaign, which is, for those that don't know, the largest gay lobby in the U.S. So with that, it was great to see the body of Christ respond and take a stand and actually get a victory.
Mark, you guys had over 5,000 signatures in just a couple of weeks, man, 19 days, and managed to win the ballot initiative. So a lot of this happened in very short order. Tell us in a nutshell, what was the reason for saying, what examples were you able to take to the people and say, this is why this is an unjust law and it needs to be overturned?
Well, first of all, what took place is the churches and leaders, both from, not just the church community, but the business community and just citizens in general, responded, which was, then they came together. And even though they came together and the city acted like none of them were speaking, because literally that's what took place when they went before city council to try to tell city council to amend it, get rid of it, and so forth, and they refused to do so. They passed it by a vote of 6-2 nonetheless. What happened there is it created a synergy on the side of repeal. And so the business, the Chamber of Commerce came out in favor, which, by the way, a lot of first things happened in Fayetteville throughout, these NDOs across the country, non-discrimination ordinances. The chamber normally sides on the side of the city or the mayors of those particular cities. Again, nobody wants to ruffle feathers, especially not the chamber and then with the mayors and so forth. Well, here in Fayetteville, the Chamber of Commerce came out for repeal. They, too, didn't like this ordinance.
Wow.
And so when they came on board, it added even the business community. So there was no longer just the church, quote unquote. It was the whole community coming out together.
Third largest city in Arkansas, so this is a big deal. And of course, in recent months we've had the situation in Houston, Texas, where these type of quote non-discrimination ordinances have really become a battle between people of faith and churches and pastors. Pastors being subpoenaed and wanting even their personal conversations simply for disagreeing on this issue, not wanting, especially the bathroom bill side of this thing, where you say to guy, you can go into a girl's bathroom if you feel like a girl that day. I mean, some of the crazy stuff that comes out of these ordinances. What would you say to those other communities of faith and pastors about the importance of standing up and actually getting involved in either preventing something like this from being passed in your city in the first place, or in working to repeal one of these that's already been passed? Why should pastors get involved?
Well, we should get involved, first of all, because we have a mandate before God to take a stand for biblical values and principles, in our country, in our state, in our communities, and especially to our congregations. So when things like this happen that are contrary to biblical scripture, we have a mandate, a responsibility before God to engage and make sure that we're a part of impacting culture from a biblical worldview, right, from a biblical point of view here. And so we have that responsibility. And again, the church being the stabilization factor of society, we have an additional responsibility to make sure that we engage to see that things are going according to, from our standard as spiritual leaders and in churches, biblical mandate. And so that's why it's important. We've got that responsibility before God, family, country and family, to make sure that we do our part. So it's always important. And then secondly, because by us not doing anything, what we're failing to realize is what we're giving to the next generation. I mean, we need to be mindful of what's happening, not just with me in my lifetime and what's going on and the issues that we're facing today. And yes, even though some of these things that are happening with these NDOs are draconian, and, from fines to, literally jail sentence and so forth. I mean, we have that in Idaho, where the pastors were told either you do this same-sex marriage or you go to jail. Okay, and so, we praise God, we had attorneys that could step into the gap and help win this. But those are the things that are happening here, photographers.
Oh, businesses being businesses completely going out of business because they couldn't handle there was so much negative press and picketing and all of that just because as people of faith, they didn't want to participate in something that violated their faith. Yes,
and then through the courts, and then the additional thing is now not only are they winning, city council and running, national agendas at the local level through city council, and I would love to touch, why on some of that. But the point is, because there is a disconnect, on our voting processes, even as believers, as the people of faith, that, we're good to get involved at a national election and vote for the president and vote for the Senate and even, statewide, but we neglect local elections, and this is where this new agenda is coming.
That's a great
part that's been neglected.
That's exactly right, Mark. Hold that thought. We got to take a quick break. We'll come back to exactly that and what's happening on the local level, where the new battleground is, and how folks can duplicate the success that you had there. By the way, I want to mention 60. You had over 60 of the city's churches that came together on this. I mean, that is just outstanding. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. The teachings of God's Word are the best friend civil government has because these teachings deal with the heart. Only by dealing with the heart can crime be prevented. For as Jesus explained in Matthew 5, all crime comes from the heart. Understanding this, Daniel Webster, the great defender of the Constitution, once declared, "The cultivation of the religious sentiment represses licentiousness. It inspires respect for law and order and gives strength to the whole social fabric. Whatever makes men good Christians makes them good citizens. Indeed, it is not the good Christians whom the police arrest for armed robbery, gang activity, or other such crimes." Understanding this, the Founding Fathers encouraged religious instruction. For as Daniel Webster so accurately noted, good Christians make good citizens.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Mark Gonzales with us. We're talking about the victory in Fayetteville recently where they overturned the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-discrimination ordinance that we're seeing across the country that is, putting people of faith in serious jeopardy, forcing them to participate in ceremonies that are against their closely held conscience and religious beliefs. The situation in Houston, all these things are happening across the country, and it's nice to get some good news where the people of Fayetteville, a ballot measure here, had to actually overturn their city council in order to reverse this, but got it done. And Mark, you were saying right before the break, this is the new battleground. We've gotten a little better at paying attention on the national level or even the state level, but we tend to ignore those local elections. I mean, I see often in city council races and school board races and that sort of thing, 100, 200 people voting out of tens of thousands. So we have neglected that area.
Yes, we have. On the average across America, when it comes to a city council election, and it's even worse when it comes to school board, but at a city council election, we're talking, on an average of 6% of the city comes out to vote in the city election. Okay? I mean, that's, when you sit there and you think, that's pretty amazing.
No kidding.
Everyone, any additives you want to add to this, it's for us to not participate.
But just to flip that, Mark, 94% didn't vote. 94% stayed home and ignored who was going to run the government that was closest to their home and their backyard.
Exactly. And it's such an important issue, so important that now you have, national groups running national agendas and coming to the local municipalities, right? Because they know we can win here because the church has walked away from here. And because I say the church, I'm talking because of people of faith that have biblical values and a biblical worldview and believe a certain principles that were taught out of Scripture, that, we have the power of the vote to voice our opinion, because that's how government works here in this great country called America. And so with that, we're not exercising that. So thus, we're allowing other folks to speak, and then we begin to react. And that's what's been going on, to the tune of now going to close to 200 cities that this has been going on. And that's why we're excited about that we were able to, get this victory in Fayetteville, and we're looking and hoping and believing that we'll be able to get ahead of some of these other cities that are also trying to pass, additional NDOs going forward, because the church is waking up. Because San Antonio woke up Houston. Houston helped Fayetteville. Now Fayetteville's going to help others. And now we got Plano, Texas, who also passed a non-discrimination ordinance as well. That we're in that battle also. So we're seeing this. So we were able to collectively, locally, that's the whole thing. The local church needs to respond. And in Fayetteville, we had great pastors, great leadership that stepped up to the plate, from, the Arkansas Family Council to the Repeal 119 committee groups that were led by Christian businessmen, Christian pastors, and so forth, that came together. And they knocked on doors, they got signatures, they made phone calls, and they literally got engaged at every level to make sure that this thing was going to be repealed, because it hadn't happened before, and it did, and it took place. And the other side came out in droves. They brought in, high-powered consultants from across the country. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the church coming together proved to be the winning factor, and we came together and we won. And then that was exciting, because at the end of the day, this is unconstitutional. It's against our religious freedoms, our religious conscience, the things that we believe. So it's nothing against, it's totally against an agenda, okay, not an individual. This is an agenda that's coming through the country, and it's time the church stands up, and it's happening, and we're excited about that, and it needs to continue because it's not over.
The numbers, Mark, are pretty staggering when you think about it in terms of what it takes to win these battles. I say staggering. They're shocking to me that it takes so little. I mean, if you've got 6% showing up in these city elections, a couple of churches, if everybody in a couple of churches in that town would show up, it's game over. I mean, it doesn't even take half of the churches in that community. I mean, obviously you had a big coalition that you got together here in Fayetteville, but man, I mean, it's 6%. I mean, you get just a few churches to actually show up, and you can win these battles.
Yes, you surely can. I mean, there's, like you mentioned earlier, there's elections and races that are being won by 100 votes, and some even less. So with that said, it's very critical, it's important, and more than ever for us to engage at the local level, because that is a new battleground. But if we, fulfill our responsibilities, we can begin to, stem the tide and turn this back around, because it is, it won't be easy, but it's very doable. Okay, we can begin to get the numbers on our favor of putting, righteous leaders in places of authority. Because I tell folks all the time, okay, the world is not going to, a secular world is not going to put righteous people in places of authority. They're not going to do it. It's going to take the church to do that. So that means the church is going to have to engage. If we want godly leadership, we want godly laws, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to submit to these laws, whether we like the laws or not. Okay, there will be a consequence. In this case, a lot of these NDOs are carrying misdemeanors and fines and jail time and so forth, and we can cry about it all we want to. But at the end of the day, when that law becomes law and you don't fulfill it, you break it, there's going to be a consequence, which means as a pastor, I may just go to jail, or I may have to pay a fine or whatever, or I won't pay the fine, which means I'll have to go to jail, because we're not going to compromise to this. And so that's why it's important that for us to get ahead and do our part. And if we begin to vote, okay, in our city council, citywide elections, we can begin to turn this thing around. And in Fayetteville, that also happened. We were able to put a city council member into one of those spots. So now we have 3 votes that we would consider biblical worldview votes. And then we had a fourth that lost by 146 votes. Okay? And so I don't even want to think of what...
One church could have turned that one too, right?
Yes. But nonetheless, now we know it's not a 6-3, 6-2 vote, it's a 5-3. And then we just keep, getting additional folks to run for office that are coming from churches and that are Christian and sound, principled businessmen and women and people of faith that can run for office. Again, but at the end of the day, it's going to take a movement of action, a voting movement, that we step up to the plate and we go to the ballot box. If we're going to be, like we all like to say, we're the hands and we're the feet, of Jesus and so forth, and so then we're going to have to be his vote. Okay, we're going to have to become that vote and go to the ballot box and make sure we continue that extension of the kingdom in that place.
Yeah.
So once again, we can take over government.
Amen. HispanicActionNetwork.com. Great tools on the website. Some great videos to be able to share with your church and others in your network to get them motivated and involved to take action. Mark, God bless you, man. Keep up the great work. Thanks for coming on today. Let's get you back soon.
Yes, we'd love to. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for all that you guys are doing. Appreciate your hard work. Folks, if you want to know more, we're going to have links today at our website at wallbuilderslive.com. You can get a hold of Mark, and you can help to fight these ordinances in your community as well. Thanks for listening today. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.